Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to the Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to change your life and your business. And today we have Colleen Kachmann with us. Welcome, Colleen.
Hello, it's good to be here.
I am so excited for our time together because I want you to share with our audience, it's the podcast is The Courage to Be. And I wanted to say, Colleen, the courage to be sober, but it's not. You just mentioned before the podcast that it's not about sobriety. It's you still help people to drink. You're a drinking coach. Mm-hmm. So that is huge. Let's just dive into this, Colleen. How did you arrive to a place of calling yourself a drinking coach?
Well, the old-fashioned way, I drank myself into a problem. And in our culture, there only seems to be one answer to over drinking. And that's why we fight it and we hide it, because the minute we admit that we might have a drinking problem, then the correct answer is to put down your drink, go directly to AA, get a sponsor, grab a copy of the big book, and start making amends to everybody in your life while they're still holding their drink, but now you've self-identified as an alcoholic. And so we fight that. I did not want to do that path, but then I woke up on the one day and I was like, oh, you can call me whatever you want to call me. Hi, I'm Colleen. I'm an alcoholic. Just make this stop. And so I just got to the place where the pain of continuing as I was worse than the pain of whatever else it is. And true fashion in my personality, most of my life, I've been an all or nothing person. So I decided to just skip the part where I felt bad. And I just embraced the identity of sobriety. Like that's a lifestyle. I was a vegan, so I already knew how to not eat meat and cheese at a party. I can figure out how to bring non-alcoholic drinks and feel morally superior while I'm doing it. So what I found was that the sobriety is just the nothing in the all or nothing cycle. And most people who quit drinking eventually do reintroduce alcohol. Unless you're going to AA for the rest of your life and you become a staunch, Alcoholics Anonymous or sober person, you adopt that as your primary identity. Most people self-correct, whether they take a period of sobriety or whether they just knock it off and, control themselves. Most people, that's the path they do. But more and more people in our culture, more women did not come out of the pandemic normal. And their drinking habits be escalated to daily drinking and higher tolerances with all the negative side effects. And they're hiding in shame because they think that they have to go to AA or they have to say they're an alcoholic or they have to get completely sober. And so what I found was that sobriety was not the solution. It did feel good. And it was fun to get the sobriety t-shirts and, the bumper sticker, and once again, adopt a new identity for myself where, extreme, I'm all or nothing. Over time, I realized this isn't about the alcohol. Honestly, what it was for me was I was a perfectionist. I was a people pleaser. I was staunched in patriarchal rules of what I couldn't do and why I needed to care what everybody thinks around me. So, sobriety, while I physically felt better, of course, I was still running the same plays on the field. You know what I mean? I still needed something to cope with the fact that I wasn't, powerful in my own right. And I was suppressing all of that. So, I'm kind of converging the two stories of how I became a drinking coach. I basically realized my problem was perfectionism, patriarchy, and people pleasing. And I decided that I was going to recover from that. And part of that was becoming a less is more person. By that time, I was a coach and I was working as a sobriety coach, helping women. And most of my clients weren't staying sober. And so I was coaching them through their own process of reintegrating alcohol. And I finally realized the only thing that's preventing me from having a glass of wine while I'm in Italy is that I feel like something's wrong with me or I have to prove something. And all of those beliefs, I just checked them at the door. I went through the process of reintroducing alcohol and confronting all of those beliefs about myself and my ability to change. And basically, I mapped out a process for people to overcome alcohol use disorder with or without going through a period of sobriety. Most of my clients now don't. They might do a 10-day detox or something like that. But for the most part, it's not a drinking problem, it's a thinking problem. And when you correct your beliefs about alcohol, it's fun and relaxing. You correct the habits, the thinking habits that are driving you to drink. You correct your relationship with yourself. Stop saying you can't control yourself. Stop believing that you can't trust yourself, and you repair that relationship. Then the drinking sitch just takes care of itself. Like, it doesn't really matter if you completely quit drinking or if you just reduce over time. So that's what I do. I'm now a drinking coach, working with women to, on average, reduce their drinking about 80% so they don't have to quit because, like the title of my podcast, it's not about the alcohol.
I love this because you're almost like taking away, like you said before, all this shame. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of people go into AA, and like you said, it's all or nothing, but you're almost like giving permission, and it's not giving permission to go into the all, it's like
Right.
you said, it's all or nothing, but of just going deeper to the root of what started the drinking. So talk to me a little bit more about this, maybe even your journey of when you went to AA, and at what point did you realize, or how long were you part of AA with this new identity that you're feeling proud of yourself? And then realizing like, oh, it's not about this. Like, I'm going a layer deeper. It's about perfectionism. Oh, I'm going a layer even deeper. It's about thinking versus drinking. Like, let's go into that arena, Colleen, because what you do is so unique. Like, I haven't heard, I mean, there's another episode for anyone that's listening. Jessica Sipanovich, she's, I think, episode 68 about conquering addiction. It's a journey of courage. So, completely different approach, but I'm loving how you've incorporated this. And I just want to go deeper into how you came to realize this and going from sobriety coach to no, like, no, you can still drink, but let's go deeper into what's the root of all of this. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
It was pretty clear to me real fast. So within a week, being a perfectionist, I get there, I order the big book, I try to do all 12 steps in one day. I'm here to win it, right? And I remember telling my story or what I was doing, and this older gentleman stood up and called me out and said, "Your confidence is going to kill you. You are powerless over alcohol." I wasn't even talking about drinking again. I was just talking about how good I felt and this was amazing. And he said that my confidence was going to kill me. And I was like, Then I was having a conversation with my sponsor, who, of course, I went and got a sponsor on day one. And she was talking about how there's division in the program because women think they should update the big book language, which was written in 1930 something by a white guy, and it's talking about women supporting their alcoholic husbands. And women now think that we should update that. And I'm like, I think I don't even need to have this conversation. If this is the quality of questions we're asking, I'm out. Like, this is not intelligent to me. I'm not going to fight for my right to be represented in who I am and tell my truth or like put up with, like, no. So I just continued sobriety on my own, thinking, I had been indoctrinated those beliefs. It happens quick. I can't ever drink again. And so I was fine bopping along through life with that. But what it really was about, as my mind cleared is I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a lack of power problem. I was telling myself so many stories about why I had to put everybody else's needs besides my own first. I couldn't leave the marriage. I was in my second marriage at the time. So I couldn't leave that marriage because I was not going to be capable of supporting myself at the level I was used to being supported. And I had 4 children, high school and college age, and I didn't think I could leave because I needed to, contribute. And if this marriage was what it was, I just didn't think I could do anything. And that was why I was drinking, because I was not understanding that I was giving away my power, constantly telling myself stories that I need to care about what other people think. I was living my life by committee. I needed to get 4 out of 5 people around me to agree with me if I needed to do something. And so that was why I was drinking. I'm a high performing, intelligent woman who can get more done before breakfast than most people can in a week. And yet I was suppressing and self-silencing myself, living just within what I called a prison of privilege. I was a prisoner of my own privilege. I was so afraid that I was not going to be capable of being big and intelligent and doing things on my own that I just didn't try. And that was really why I was drinking. I wasn't an alcoholic. I was a perfectionist. Little improvements don't work for me. I wanted it all. I wanted it now. I had no patience. And so I had to address all of those limiting beliefs that were keeping me stuck in a life I needed to escape.
This is amazing. And I appreciate your vulnerability, because it takes courage to be able to share this story. So you start realizing this, you start realizing, I love that line. I was a prisoner of my own privilege, just realizing how do you come out of it, because you have this perfectionism, there's all this shame, there's the patriarchy, like you're saying, you're living by committee. Like, how do you come out of this? Did you get a coach? Where did you find that support that obviously you weren't finding at AA, in the AA meetings?
So, as a coach, I was already a coach. So, that was a little ace card in my deck because I knew the power of mindset. And I still remember the day I realized, holy shit, I'm living in a story. My younger brother and I were at my parents', and my dad offered him a glass of wine, not me, because I'm sober. We all knew that. And my brother said, no, I'm not drinking right now. And I remember being like, ooh, did you get in trouble? Is Molly going to divorce you? Did you get a DUI? And he looks at me and he goes, saying no to a glass of wine does not mean you have a drinking problem. In fact, super sleuth, it might indicate that you don't. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, like there was a glitch in the matrix because I was still seeing the world through drinkers and non drinkers. And I was like, oh my God, I could just drop the whole story. Instead of identifying as a woman who used to have a drinking problem and now I'm sober, like I don't have anything to do with alcohol. Like I get to define myself how I want to define myself and stop giving away my power to people who are saying, well, you used to have a drinking problem and that needs to define the rest of your life. No, it doesn't. And then I get a master's degree and further into addiction and recovery learning, where I learned about the power of neuroplasticity. I was holding on to this belief that you can't unpickle a cucumber. Once you've drank yourself into a drinking problem, you're always going to struggle. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Your brain is neuroplastic. It's always learning. It's always changing. Just like your bone. Well, I don't know that for sure this is true, but I've heard just when you break a bone, it's stronger in that area. Your brain, within 6 months of overcoming a habit, addiction is a habit, not a disease. Self-correcting for that habit actually makes you stronger in your prefrontal cortex self-regulation department. Within 6 to 12 months, your ability to self-regulate is stronger than it ever was before. And it's stronger than people who have never overcome an addiction. Breaking a habit is a learning process, just like drinking and becoming dependent on alcohol is a learning process. So I started to learn about self-directed neuroplasticity. I mean, I'm a nerd. I've read all the books on dopamine regulation and nervous system regulation and how to choose the mindset and choose ease and peace as a state of mind, and how then awareness and mindfulness of seeing the story you're telling yourself. And you can tell yourself anything. Did I want to identify as a drinker or a non-drinker? I was like, no, there's so much better in life, and I'm going for that. And so that's how slowly I developed what I now use as the 7 core skills of emotional sobriety. I call it emotional sobriety, when you no longer believe your own bullshit. And I just learned all the modalities that support that. And I kind of created my own process. I created the process I wish I would have had when I was sitting on the couch feeling sorry for myself, drinking myself into a stupor every night.
This is such a fascinating topic, and just your journey, Colleen. I appreciate so much everything that you're sharing with us. Let's take a quick pause and we'll come back to this. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. So we were just talking about how, because you'd been in the self-development world and the coaching world, and you kind of coach yourself and you created your own program, of recovery, of how to come out of this, which, by the way, we will have on our private podcast. So if you're interested in all this, join our private podcast to listen to the 7 core skills of how Colleen did this. But okay, so you got a degree, you got a master's degree. I love that you self-analyze and you're like, I'm a geek. I want to learn all about this. So we're telling ourselves a new story. How long did it take you to recreate this new story for yourself and kind of step into it, believing it? Because it all starts with thinking. I'm thinking in a new way. I'm creating new habits. I'm telling a new story. And then suddenly you just pick up a drink. Like, how did this all unfold from the
Okay.
moment you had that awareness with your brother and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I don't need to
Yeah.
identify with this? And how did
Yeah.
that all go down, Colleen?
So I'll just talk in the context of alcohol, because of course, this is multifaceted over many areas of your life. But when I quit drinking, I decided I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life. This is amazing, because I'm the type of person that thinks one drink is a waste of calories and a waste of buzz. I'd rather have water. Like, I'm going to drink all of it. And I'm not ever going to have one drink, because I believe that I'm not the type of person that would enjoy one drink. And I carted that belief around in a cute little suitcase with a sobriety embroider all over it. Like, I drink all the drinks if I'm going to drink. And with other work I was doing, pharmaceutical, psychiatric drugs that I was on, nicotine addiction, eating disorders, all of these things that I've gone through in my life, I started to notice that I was actually a less is more person in other areas. I started to realize I valued peace and balance in my nervous system. I enjoy 1 or 2 bites of a piece of cake. I don't eat the whole thing. And so all of a sudden I realized, oh, well, maybe I'm a less is more person. And then, using that growth mindset, would it be possible for me to transplant the less is more attitude directly into my alcohol mindset? And so after I had that experience with my brother, where I realized the only thing stopping me from having a glass of wine with a beautiful meal or something is the fear that I can't control myself. And I had enough evidence in other areas that I've learned to self-correct and actually have no desire to get myself addicted or into a bad habit. I have no desire to wake up with a hangover. I noticed the thought pop into my head, you know what? The idea of 1 glass of wine actually sounds nice. And the thing about our dopamine is that it's wired to our self narrative. You get whatever you think you want. And so the fact that I wanted to enjoy one glass of wine, and it was no longer about, well, I want to drink the whole bottle and now I just have to use willpower. Like once I align my desires of, I want to be a moderate drinker, I want to go out to dinner and enjoy wine again. And so I got to a day where I decided, all right, this is a trust fall here. And here's what I know. I don't trust that this is going to be a good idea. I trust that I'll be able to self-correct if it is not. I have asked for help before. I know how to get myself out of this particular hole specifically. So if I slide back into old habits, or if I notice that I've reawakened some monster deep in my soul that's just unquenchable thirst, if I notice that, I'll know how to handle it. So I didn't trust myself to be perfect. I trusted myself to take care of myself no matter what. And so that was where one day, the first time I was still married at the time, and my ex-husband's mom had passed away, and there was like a $400 bottle of wine they found at her house. And my ex-husband was pouring all of it for everybody. And I looked at him and I go, I'm not that sober. Pour it for me too. And that was my first day. And, I probably had half or a third of a glass of wine. And I sat with that and I felt the experience. And I'll have to be honest with you, 3 years of sobriety does not train you to become a moderate drinker. You have to train in context. So I had to do a lot of work to manage my mind and anxiety and old thought patterns that would come up, but this is what created the roadmap that I now help other people through, because I've navigated exactly the mindsets that come up and how to respond differently to them. And it all begins with putting your hand on your heart and saying, I completely trust myself to take care of myself, even when I make a mistake. That's kind of step one.
This is incredible. You just mentioned the roadmap with your clients that you created. And you said that about 80% have cut down their alcohol intake. Is that something?
100% of my women cut down their alcohol on average by 80%. I would
Wow.
say I drink 90 to 95% less than I used to. And some women drink 50% less because they're not heavy drinking assholes like I was, So on
Mhm.
average, I do an intake and a form. On average, it's about 80%. That's what most people set the goal at.
And how long does it take them to go through this process with you?
Takes a year.
Okay.
It takes a year. I do identity-based change, not behavior-based change. So the way my program works is your job is to stop trying to figure everything out and to focus on mastering the 7 core skills of emotional sobriety. Your drinking will take care of itself. Now, I do have mindful drinking activities and a course specifically to address toning down your behavior. Some women stop for a period of time and then reintroduce slowly. Some people just cut back, from 5 drinks to 4 drinks, 4 drinks to 3 drinks, more sober days each week. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And life is long. You're allowed to change your mind anytime you want. Like what worked for you today isn't going to work for you tomorrow. So don't get too attached to anything. Learning how to trust your experience and adjust to your changing needs, menopause, lack of sleep, going through a divorce. Like there's no right amount of alcohol to drink. And that's the perfectionistic mindset. I used to think 2 drinks twice a week would be perfect. Well, sometimes that's way too much, and sometimes it's not enough. Let's please pass me the bottle. So it's teaching women how to connect with their experience, get out of their head and start feeling their body. And those are the skills I teach, where drinking as you want to drink is a side effect of the real goal, which is becoming a woman who trusts herself and has mastered the skills of the 7 core skills of emotional sobriety.
Let's go into perfectionism, like you were just mentioning right now. And shame, you mentioned that before too. Have you been able to master that more, because you've identified that that's been there for you? Have you
Mhm.
been able to release the perfectionism side and the shame that we carry? And where do you think that comes from?
It's not as complicated as we think. I used to think I just came with deep pain or there was something inside of me, and I didn't want to blame my parents, but there's some stuff I'm not aware of. There's got to be some early sexual abuse that my mom didn't know about. There has to be some reason that I carry so much shame. And the truth is, I was simply never taught to process change. As females grow up, we are taught to manage our behavior and suppress, ignore, avoid, and hide any emotion that doesn't match with the projected version that we are rewarded for being. So by the time we get to midlife, we're emotionally constipated. We don't know how to feel lazy or ugly or old without either polypositiving ourselves through it. Like, no, this is not, like we don't know how to allow ourselves to feel bad. And the thing about people is we tend to identify with certain emotions and but like the piano with all the keys, our bodies play all the keys. There is no just one song that we play. And so how did I process it was I learned how to feel my negative emotions without believing them and just allowing the energy. So overthinking is under feeling. I spent my whole life in my head trying to come up with a story that made sense or made me feel better or made somebody else feel better. And it's like part of getting out of perfectionism is get out of your head. Stop thinking that you know and just get curious about the energy and how do I support myself in this moment. So it's nothing to figure out. You're not broken. This is a skill deficit. You've simply never been taught how to properly and healthfully manage your emotions. You've been too busy trying to manage your behavior and get it all right. And so it's kind of an inside out way of being where you learn how to feel and take actions that support you and just get out of your head and just let it all go. There's nothing to figure out. You can let all of those problems go. It's just mental, problems are a mindset issue. Problems are your brain telling you there's something wrong with you or the world. Really, there's just feelings to be felt and actions to be taken. It's skills that people are missing, not actually this perfectionist thing. It's just a label we put on people who do it all right and keep going. And whoever smiles the most and puts up with the most bullshit wins.
So let's take it even deeper then, Colleen. Does that come from our culture, from patriarchy, of how women have been taught to be and to behave and to react to life?
I think it does. And I think it even goes deeper than that because our nervous systems are patterned in childhood. And as children, your survival depends on the adults around you being okay. So we are wired to tell people what they want to hear and to mirror the behaviors that we're told are good or bad or right or wrong. And if that doesn't work, if being the good girl doesn't work, then we go the opposite way and we be the bad girl. So I think it's human nature that we carry these childhood beliefs about what it takes to be successful, get good grades on your report card, stop asking questions about Santa Claus, because God forbid we ask how a fat man gets down the chimney and we don't even have a chimney. So that's weird. And we're taught by our culture, there's no evil plan. It's just the practices culturally and, gender-based practices that are just the water in which we're swimming, that truly powerful people have to learn to see, spot, and decide which ones work for you and don't. You have to decide that you want to rise above the beliefs that you think are true because, oh, what? You can believe whatever you want, including lizard people live in the center of the earth and control the planet. Like you can believe anything you want. And if you truly want to step into your power, then you have to acknowledge that everything you believe is a choice, and you give yourself a choice to see what other beliefs you want to try on and work with.
To me, this is all fascinating because I feel it's so like wired into us, and especially as women and little girls. I wonder, so you said you have 4 kids, right? Boys, girls?
2 boys, 2 girls.
What would you do differently? Or maybe you've already been doing with your girls. I don't know at what point you started realizing all of this, but what would you suggest that we start teaching our kids, I'd say girls because it's more ingrained, but I'm sure boys too, about processing emotions instead of just stuffing them out so that they don't have to come, be 50, like you're saying, and then everything just explodes, or we go into all these addictions.
Yeah. I think what you just said is exactly, we have to teach our children that how to regulate their nervous system, how to identify when they are in a state of stress, when a state of reaction, and that their personal power is always in their ability to find their own peace. I taught my children how to rely on my approval. I taught my children, go get those grades at school, even though you don't even know what is a grade. Like, that's not even a real thing. But I can tell you it's also never too late. I'm 50. My oldest is 27. My children are coming along with me. I have broken the generational cycle. We're able to talk about addiction without shame. We're able to talk about self-correcting. We're able to talk about owning your own feelings as being a product of your thoughts and beliefs. Even yesterday, my mom, I was down visiting and she got mad at me because I walked home from somewhere and I did this to her. And now with my kids, I talk about, I didn't do anything to my mom. It's her thoughts and beliefs that are causing the problem. I just stood in my own power, and now I get to be uncomfortable because my mom's mad at me, and I get to own that and not blame my mom. Taking personal ownership for everything you feel is what we need to be teaching our children. And we can teach that in kindergarten. We can teach that to children. We've always taught our people how to manage their behavior. Do good, get good, be good. And we have to teach them it's okay to feel bad, and to create safe spaces where they're allowed to properly express their anger, properly express all the negative stuff. We just have to change the way we speak to our kids and stop focusing on external metrics and focusing on peace of mind, peace in your body. Like, it's just a value shift, right? Because in our culture, we teach the acquisition of shit, and we need to teach the acceptance of responsibility and peace. So what
That
would I do
is,
different? All of it is
I
what I
was
would
just
do.
gonna say,
And then they'd still need therapy. You know what I mean? Like, I taught my kids how to eat healthy, and now they all have food issues and tell me, being vegan and packing their lunches every day traumatized them. They wanted to eat the school lunch. Like, kids, we can't fix the world for our kids. We just have to be a safe space. So I'd probably be more laid back, honestly, and be more comfortable with their failures and stop trying to think that my job is to protect them from life and the pain of life. Like, I'd probably let them hurt longer. I don't know.
you are so self-aware, as I'm listening to you, Colleen, just realizing, and you are giving them a gift. And I was laughing when you said that they'll still, need therapy because they've been traumatized. I always say that with my daughter, I'm like, we try, and she will come up when she's like 18 or 19 or 20, and she'll be like, and you did this, so no matter how much we try to do
Yeah.
the things the right way, they are their own persona. They're their own human beings that need to have their own experience of life. And we're just here as guides. I do agree with that.
Yeah, we learn from pain. We grow in shit. You can't have growth without the struggle. And we protect our kids so much. Oh, somebody said something mean. We need to go to school and figure out who the bully is. And, we've created this cancel culture and this victim culture. And a safe space requires everybody to get an update every single day of what it's okay to say and what's not okay to say. It's like we've raised our kids to believe that they're going to melt if somebody says something, and so I don't know. I'd probably get canceled. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm going to do another quick pause and we'll be right back. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help, thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. So let's pivot a little bit. Going back to addictions, like you were talking about, like nicotine addictions, alcohol addictions, food. I feel like we all have some sort of addiction of some sort, whatever it is, porn, cigarettes, alcohol, food, like you name it, shopping. I mean, there's always something there if we really want to look closely. It could even be our phone. If you're thinking to yourself, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't have any addiction, like I am perfect and I've never gone through any type of addiction. Talk to me more about addictions, and is that part of being taught that we need to manage our behavior versus how to transmute our emotions or how to manage our emotions? Like, talk to me more about addictions, Colleen, and go deeper with that, with your knowledge of just, the brain and how we think and how we feel, and how you've gone through all of this with your process, and maybe even with some examples with some of the stories with your clients, like if they've been able to manage the alcohol, could they manage some other type of addiction and just be like, it's not the all or nothing, like where does it go back to?
Okay, so I think that there's two factors in play. Addiction is an accelerated habit, right? It's just a habit on steroids. It's a little harder to overcome because an addiction is when whatever you're using is actually causing the problem, but then also solving the problem. You get stuck in this negative feedback loop. But our phones qualify too. And addiction is a spectrum, and you can move up and down the spectrum. You can be a little tiny, eensy bitty bit dependent, and then you could be, raging, whatever. But it's all actually about consciousness. It's about your ability to control your own focus, and you choose what you pay attention to. Sometimes that's harder and sometimes that's easier, but we live in a culture where we are getting an onslaught of distractions and overstimulation, which is a fertile breeding ground for addiction. Because if you're not managing your agenda and your focus, somebody else is managing it. Somebody else has your attention, and you're responding to intermittent rewards or marketing cues or TikTok or the never-ending scroll feed. So really, I think if people had one goal in life, it wouldn't to be to not have addictions. It would be to be in control of their own attention. And that has to actually be a stated goal. You have to decide that that's what you want. You have to decide that you get to pay attention to what you want. And then the second thing, as I said, there were two things. It's the desire to regulate your own nervous system, which if you are regulated, if I only enjoy alcohol, if I've had enough sleep, if I'm not super stressed, if something pisses me off in the middle of a glass of wine, I set the glass of wine down because I have no desire to dampen my alertness or my cognitive processing skills. And so people come to rely on external crutches, usually substances, but can also be behaviors like gambling or sex or shopping or even exercising or just being a perfectionistic workaholic or whatever. Like, we're trying to make ourselves feel better because we don't know how to make ourselves feel better on our own. We don't know we have that power. We think we have to get or do so that we can be okay. And the truth is, it's upside down. The skill you have to learn is how to be okay so that you can move from a place of okayness, before you have the job, before you have the money, before you have the spouse, or, whatever it is that you want to get. You don't want to have your emotional wellness rely on things you can't control. And so learning the skill of managing your emotions then allows you to interact with addictive substances, because everything in this world is addictive. Everything's going to cause cancer. Everything is going to lead to an addiction. You can get addicted to water, for God's sake. I mean, because it's all tied to your self-narrative about what you think you want and what you think is going to make you happy. And that's why the tagline of my program is "Get Happy, Not Sober." because happy people don't need to drink themselves into a stupor or work themselves into or eat themselves or spend themselves. It's about learning how to pay attention to what you're paying attention to, meta thinking, and choose your focus and setting your focus on a regulated nervous system. Paying attention to your own mind, thinking about how you think, asking higher level questions. That's where I noticed AA wasn't for me, is I'm not going to sit here and argue about whether women have a right to update the AA book. I mean, dumb question, bye-bye. And so, in terms of, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but addiction is just a habit, and all habits are a lack of focus. That's it. The brain's job is to habituate things to get you what you think you want easier without having to think about it. And so if you don't ever question what it is you think you want, you're just going to get the default of, whatever you saw on TV that got the shiny shit that caught your attention, or what your friends have that you think you want. It's just you managing your own mind allows you to have control over your consciousness and over your destiny, really.
Yeah, that was so powerful how you said that. And what kind of practices are you doing to regulate your emotional system, your nervous system?
I do all of them because you layer. Some things work some days and some things don't work. I value my sleep. I get outside every single day. I do yoga once or twice a week. I lift weights. I make sure my body is strong. I feed my body. So I do basic self-care practices. But then the brain likes novelty. I love stumbling into a new practice, and it'll work for a while. The good morning, I love you practice, or breath work practice. And then I just allow myself to try new things. I'm not tied to any one right way, because again, what works today isn't going to work tomorrow and didn't work yesterday, but it might work again in a year if you circle back. So I do all of the things, as many as I can every day. And I don't put pressure on myself to have the perfect morning routine. Some mornings I get up and go outside, and some mornings I get right down to my desk and I don't. It's okay.
Thanks for sharing and giving everyone else permission, because by you giving yourself permission that it doesn't have to be perfect and that it doesn't have to be cookie cutter like every day like this, that goes back to perfectionism. So I love that you said, I try them all at different moments. So where can people find you, Colleen?
I have a podcast called It's Not About the Alcohol. And then I'm on TikTok at Hangover Whisperer, and I'm on Instagram at The Hangover Whisperer. Some asshat took Hangover Whisperer, so I had to change it. But if you search for me on Instagram or TikTok, you can find Hangover Whisperer and you'll find me, or find my podcast, It's Not About the Alcohol.
That's fabulous. Thank you. I love asking at the end of the podcast, what's something that our listeners can do to live a life with more courage?
Stop and be silent and still at least 60 seconds once a day. Listen to the silence. Stop and turn it off and just give yourself a pause. That takes a lot of courage, to give yourself permission to take a 60-second break in today's world. And of course, 5 minutes is better, but really not more than 5 minutes. That is courageous. To give yourself permission to breathe and stop is very courageous. And what's in that silence is what's waiting for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Colleen, for being with us today. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes, and all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.